and create them as intelligent information.
Okay.
So that's really where we're going. I mean, could you give us just a couple of minutes explanation of what you do? Because
Yeah, of
I
course.
think that would be good for the group.
So we're an outfit that only exclusively works with the NHS. We focus very much on smart buildings, and we look at all things related to the Wave 1 projects that's going on in the NHS at the moment, all the new build hospitals. We help them with understand their golden thread of data. That's one of the streams of work we do. We have lots of other streams of work, but we help them understand the golden thread of data and the importance of setting up the contracts correctly with the supply chain, design supply chain or build supply chain, whichever part you like, so that it feeds appropriately downstream into the operational environment, so that they can ultimately get towards growing a digital twin type capability, and everything that entails, which, everybody's out there selling snake oil, in my opinion, around digital twins. It all has to stem from good quality data. And if you don't get that right in the early stages of the golden thread, then the likelihood of having a useful digital twin is severely diminished. So very much that our focus with a number of NHS trusts already. We help them with that BIM activity, as well as a whole load of other gap analysis, digital gap analysis, looking across the estates and facilities systems that support a smart building environment. And then we help them design that, and we help them identify the right supply chain partners to develop and design that smart building future, and then understand how that underpins the overall digital environment, because digital goes much wider, obviously, than the building itself. It goes out into other healthcare systems, nurse call systems, wayfinding systems, etc.
Service planning, activity capacity planning, and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, George. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. We're very active at the moment. Matt kindly introduced us to this session, and we're trying to get some work moving with Matt, looking at sort of data, asset data dictionaries, etc., within a number of trusts at the moment. So the great thing about the NHS at the moment, and there's not many people say great things about NHS at the moment, I'm sure you all get the press, but it is the good thing is they've got a land of opportunity to improve. And if we can help them with the new hospitals, it means they can then spill that over back into the legacy environment, which is obviously the new build is 10% of the total hospital estate. But if they embrace the new capabilities that can exist through using good data and deploying good digital capabilities, we feel that will allow the legacy environment to play catch up. And they can spill that back into the legacy environment in the long run. So there's a wealth of opportunity. There's funding, which is good, because obviously these new build projects are all allocated funding from the government already, and it's held by an outfit called a New Hospital Programme, who are part of NHS England, who are also severely diminished, as I'm sure you've read in the press as well recently, now Department of Health and Social Care. We that's why we're exclusively in the NHS, because we know there's budget, and we know there's activity, and there's need in that space.
So Mark, just to bring you up to speed, the Nata from the New Hospital Programme has been attending some of these meetings. So she's already engaged with what we're doing. Also, as far as, sorry, Chris, you got your hand up. You're on mute, Chris.
Honestly, once every day. Sorry, no, it's a question from Mark, and so you can wait. Didn't mean to cut across. Sorry, George.
No, okay. So so the significance of this as well, Mark, is I wear two hats. I chair this organisation and also BIM for Housing, and that's all pro bono work. My business, Active Plan, we're a software company, and we're working with Matt, but we've been heavily involved in the health sector in with both the NHS and also the SPVs, the PFI projects for the last 20 years.
Yeah, okay.
So we've got a lot of acute hospitals actually in active plan. So we're able to come at things from the other end of the telescope, as it were, coming at things. So we've also done a lot of work over the years with new builds, but we're sort of bridging the gap between
Brilliant.
those.
Yeah, sorely needed, George. I think it's the.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you've just described our first slide in every presentation deck, which is a telescope spun around looking at things through
Right.
the estates and facility directors lens, thinking how the hell do I get hold of all this new build information and manage it into my estate? So it's exactly that. We empathise with exactly what you're saying there. Yeah.
So the other thing that's probably worth just mentioning is that the way in which we've got BIM in asset management geared up is that there's a lot of things that are common to all types of buildings. So, and therefore, what we've tried to do, and it's not easy, we've got, if you like, a cross sector and cross activity to be able to bring these things together. So, for example, on Monday we had a session on schools and education and universities, because a lot of the people here are not, they may be working in healthcare, but they're also delivering buildings for lots of other type of facilities as well. And therefore, what we should be doing is making sure that there's consistency across the board. So our implementation of the golden thread is to try and look at things in that sort of holistic way. And in fact, that might be something that I just bring up now, if I may, just in terms of how we're interpreting the golden thread, because we're probably the closest to the custodians of what the golden thread should mean. And you're quite right, Mark. There's a lot of people that are interpreting it quite differently. We've got a community now that's been working on the golden thread for 5 years. So when the golden thread as a term was rolled out by Judith Hackett, and the government was putting together the guidance that then turned into the legislation, they recognised that they couldn't give an explicit expression of what the golden thread was. So they turned to the industry to do that. And because at the time the golden thread was principally about residential, it isn't now, but it was about residential. They asked L&Q, who's one of the biggest housing associations, to coordinate an activity, an industry-wide coordinate activity. I was given the task of looking after the asset and survey information workstream.
Right.
And I know nothing. The people that know things are this community. So we turned to this community and we started setting up workshops. And we actually, in a very methodical way, went through each of the asset types that are principally driving fire dampers and smoke dampers and things like that. And then you drawing out from people what information do we actually need, and how can we express that? So if you go and look, if anybody here, because some people are new here, some people are veterans, we've got all this information published on our BIM for Housing website, and you can access that through either BIM for Housing or BIM in Asset Management. So we've got publications of saying, what information do you need to know about a sprinkler system? What is it about fire doors that can go wrong? We pulled together dozens of people who have got expertise in these particular areas. So the upshot of that is that we've made this so that we can then uh, coordinate people's knowledge and then turn it into things that are reusable for everybody. So I'll just, if I may, I'll just step through the way in which. Has anybody else got any observations, by the way, in what I've just said there?
George, I was just going to add to what Mark had said at the beginning, which is great to hear, really, really good to hear. So I work for McDonald, and we do quite a lot in healthcare and all that sort of stuff, and we're involved in the NHP. One of the things that we are at this point thinking about, probably concerned about, I suppose, is the development of some quite technologically advanced built asset infrastructure and built estate, and how that plays with an existing workforce that is doing a great job in terms of what it can do, but is still at times still struggling a bit to keep up, which sounds a bit unfair, but there are pockets of it. So we're just thinking, what is it that we need to do to assure people around the development of, let's just say, digitally native buildings, digitally constructed infrastructure around the sort of working day, the day-to-day life of someone who works in those spaces, and sort of bridging that gap. So we're really interested in that space. Not to say that we've got particular answers or results yet, but we know there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space around helping people to take these buildings on. So definitely thinking about that.
Sure. And the other aspect, for example, in fact, let me just step through this, because then I'm sure there's other people that have got observations to make. Basically the way we're very much looking at the golden thread is it needs to be holistic. It needs to cover all of the systems that are being used, being planned, and also, really importantly, it needs to be kept up to date. So what we've done is taken this sort of guidance of saying, what is the golden thread of information? It's electronic. It goes through the whole life, and this is really important. It needs to be easily transferred and kept up to date when things hand over. So one of the things that we've already identified is that warranty information and warranties need to be transferred to the client. At the moment, warranties is a confusing area. There's very little clarity, but that's something that we as a group can then feed back to say, this is something that probably wouldn't cost the industry anything. It would just bring a level of clarity on this. So the way in which we're looking at things is the golden thread can be broken down relatively well into a series of activities, general activities of making sure that all the stakeholders, their needs are aligned and coordinated, so recorded, and then having a protocol or a means of defining classification and information capture. So these are all activities that we believe need to be actioned for the golden thread to work. Then, when the building is then completed, it then goes into its operational phase. It's important then to keep a record of any changes that take place, and also then be able to inform the many different systems. And it's important to recognize that there's no one system will be used for this, so that things like compliance and planning and things can be done in a way. And also we need to then ensure that the models remain as built. So with any changes that take place, we need to make sure, and findability is going to be important. So those are the principles that we're working to. Now, what we're also trying to do is make this so it isn't a compliance-led process. It needs to be business-led, because if it's just compliance-led, people will gravitate to the lowest common denominator, and also it may well not get the investment that it needs. So what we've then done in the report that we've produced a white paper report to actually look at what the outcomes are that are measurable, that should be of interest to senior directors. So, for example, making sure that the information is auditable by using much better quality information auditing and standardization. How can we get cost and risk reduction across the life cycle? How can we improve the engagement of supply chains so they're providing the information and therefore they become responsible for making sure that it's right, rather than it going through a third party? Digital records, I think that's a given. Operation and competence management, and also affecting automation. So these are intended to be business related values or deliverables that stream through the whole of the golden thread. And the principle is that the likelihood is that the information's already been collected. So therefore, at the moment, it's probably being wasted because it's being collected and then discarded many times. And from the work that we did, we've come up with some headline figures to be able to put some tangible cost savings and risk reduction measures in there. So this is the message that we're trying to get out there. And what we're then looking at is, traditionally, the risk was probably this size, and the amount of information that you needed to address that risk is this size. Now, the risk is much higher. We're in a regulated environment. So therefore, the amount of information is much bigger. So we need to have mechanisms to enable us to consume that information. So what we've done for several years, we've been pushing the principle of having all the information machine readable. But to really make that happen, you've got to have people working collaboratively. And you've also got to put the context of where that particular asset is, because a pump in one circumstance is going to be fundamentally different than a pump in a different circumstance. And what's common amongst those things that we can align around are spaces and the assets that are in those spaces, and maybe the systems and the like. We're also making it so that rather than looking at it through the, if we look at the if we look at the telescope thing, rather than through the statutory lens, we're also looking at things from an operational perspective, and also looking at things from an organizational perspective. So again, the common thing there is spaces and assets. We've then got a perspective that the fire safety people have got. People are looking at energy consumption. And again, spaces and assets are going to be core to that. So you can see the theme. I'm on a run now. We've now got, in healthcare, and some of the people aren't in this group are not as familiar with healthcare, I think, as you are. But certainly from my experience, one of the key things is making sure that the service lines, let's say physiotherapy, for example, they need to make sure that they've got the right care settings to be able to deliver the service. So the relationship between what it is that clinically is being delivered and what is needed for the facilities is important. and therefore availability then becomes an issue. And again, spaces and assets. You've then got primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, and again, spaces and assets. We've got this step up care, step down care. That's about how do we prevent that horrible term bed blocking. So how can we make it so that the various different estates and various different properties can be used effectively to enable people that are going into hospital to not necessarily go straight in, maybe go through a level step up care, and then when they get discharged, they may not be ready to come home yet, but they can then go into a facility that isn't an acute facility that's costing maybe £1,000, £2,000 a day. So that's broadly what we're trying to do from a healthcare perspective.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very similar one for schools and residential. And the other aspect, as we've also got this scenario as well, where you've got those different things. So where we're trying to go with the task force is that we want to bring together people that are knowledgeable, have a desire, and also some solutions, so they actually become tested solutions. So people are working collaboratively, and therefore we can then bring those together and offer those as solutions to end clients. So it means that an end client can maybe come to a group of people rather than going to, with the greatest respect to even Chris there, rather than going to Mott MacDonald and say, Mott MacDonald will then act as perhaps a coordinator. There's value, hopefully, in being able to have a fire engineer, somebody that's a healthcare planner, for example, people that are expert in their own areas without having an unnecessary, perhaps, layer of management, as it were, so that you may cut me off here, Chris, but that being able to have the experts working directly together, I think is valuable. And then we can use classification to be able to glue those things together. So therefore, there's a range of different applications, some of which ActivePlan will provide, some of which other people will provide, but we make sure that they all work together. Therefore, the client's got something that then hangs together. So when Matt mentioned your organization, it sounded to me as though we're aligned in terms of our thinking in that area. Finally, on this, we produced this white paper, which was published last week. And what we're trying to do is use this to define what the golden thread actually means, that we can then share it with other people. So if we can define that, it's going to make it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've been doing is, over this last few weeks, is looking at things from a coordination perspective to say, these are the business benefits for anybody that is enacting this work. And we've then got a work stream looking at the next step, which is to say, okay, what do we have to do? What are the next steps in terms of activities that are needed tasks that are part of those activities, so that we can come up with a task information delivery plan, so that the information we've got is then being collected in a joined up way. So Franco, who's on the call now, what Franco's trying to do is coordinate that exercise of collecting all of the activities. We're using another software application called Mortar to capture that information. The reason for that is that a lot of the big contractors are using Mortar to do their task information delivery plan. So it makes sense for us to use that rather than spreadsheets to do it. But we can use spreadsheets. But the principle here is that what we're looking for is input for people to say what activities are they doing and what tasks are being done to do that. So, Franco, could I just hand over to you for a moment? You can explain what you're trying to do with recruiting some volunteers.
Okay, I will do it. Apologies for those that have already seen this single slide, but I will do my best. Okay, so what we are talking about is an exercise that will go through 3 phases. One, which is basically just a collection of tasks, something like this. So we are encouraging a certain number of contributors to participate to this collection first stage, which will be technically done either directly as an input to this Mortar application or via Excel. And this collection phase will end up in a list of, let's call it raw data. We will then analyze it, put it in order if you wish. We organize it. We will identify duplicates. We will make sure that the task definition is clear to everybody. And this organized data will facilitate the production of a certain number of reports that will tell us something about the problems encountered and things that are normally being done. And all of this process will be fully transparent throughout the whole exercise, and everybody that has contributed will kind of receive a return of investment of the effort required to do this work. What can I say? I believe that this is really useful, and I will do my best to coordinate the traffic of information, and I hope that you will participate. Okay.
Okay. So
basically,
yeah. So obviously, some people were on the calls on Monday and Tuesday. So as Franco said, apologies that that's been repeated. But if you are involved in doing task work, producing information delivery plans and the like, then I think you could probably contribute to that work. And the important thing is that when that work is done, you will benefit from it because we're going to be sharing it. So it's a collective exercise. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
George, I forgot to say one important thing. You may be either data information producers or generators or data information consumers. So I think the benefit is for both groups of people involved in data management. I thought it was important to add this. Sorry.
Yep. Okay. Good. All right. So yeah, I think what I'd like to do now is just stop for a moment and just ask, put it out to the floor, as it were. Has anybody's got any comments and observations about what we've said there?
Well, from my
Nobody
perspective,
says anything, I'm going to pick on people.
Yeah, if I may say something, George, sorry, from my perspective, thank you for the opportunity to join you on this quest. I think there's a few questions around interoperability rules. I think was something when you mentioned all the different environments working together. I know for a fact in the early days of the NHP program, we advocated strongly for the NHS to develop some principles around interoperability and the ownership of data and the responsibility for that data, and then to ensure effectively that the suppliers in the market weren't able to, as they have done in the clinical space, I hasten to add, sadly, but they have, big suppliers in the market have kind of pushed the NHS, unknowingly perhaps, into some state where the suppliers own the data and the NHS doesn't own the data, or the suppliers have access to the data and the NHS is not exploiting the value of that data properly. Yeah. So for us, there are a number of principles that we sort of certainly worked with the NHS early doors on, and we tried to enforce in all the work that we do in this space around interoperability, ownership of the data, because everybody, the data is the all of the 21st century. Everybody wants to get their hands on it. Big tech especially wants to get their hands on it, especially our lovely NHS data, because it's a very rich vein of information, and that should be protected and to a level where it realizes its value and it is therefore exploited and they get a return on it. So I'm not saying they shouldn't share it. I'm just saying if they do share it, the NHS are getting some benefit from it. They're doing it knowingly and getting benefit. So for us, that was some sort of key principles around interoperability that drives that, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, it's good. Good point.
Yeah, I can give a quick answer on that, because I've been around doing this whole BIM thing for many years, Mark. You know, I was involved when we started what's now called Building Smart. So back in back in '94. And I was part of the team that were looking after facilities management when IFC was being developed. So I'm a believer in IFC. What I'm also very knowledgeable, very experienced about, is where IFC doesn't work in itself, and the fact that a lot of people that are using that technology to transfer information, they don't understand that there are many different model view definitions. And the model view definition is there to define what information is needed for different purposes. And the model view definition for asset information handover and exchange is called COBE.
Yeah.
So that's what we encourage people to use. That is the proper model view definition for asset information handover. So that's one aspect. I think the other really important point is taxonomy and naming conventions and layering conventions and the like. So all of these things need to be, because they're all neutral. They should be all open standards for us to exchange information. But what's really important is to make sure that the information that's being handed over to the asset teams is actually usable and editable. And if we've got time just towards the end, I'm going to ask my colleague Tim to show what we've been doing with O&M information just recently on a healthcare facility. This is something that nobody's seen yet, by the way. Those of you that have seen what Tim's been doing on O&Ms, we've done this for a big office development. We've done it for a university, but and also for social housing. But we're just doing it at the moment for a new healthcare facility. Sorry, Matt.
So yeah, kind of almost backing on the point on the interoperability bit, because obviously I had a background in software kind of company management, obviously before with Site Desk, and we had this conversation before, George. But I think the SaaS model really annoys me. The user subscription stuff to try and get users out and stuff like and things like that. I think certainly for the commercial opportunity for software providers is if you realize you have the barrel that oil's in, you can refine the data out of it. As long as you can make that oil go into different barrels, it keeps that vendor lock-in worry from clients really out there. But the annoyance I have is, so we recently had a export from a CAF FM, Bellrock, Concerto, and the data schema. We actually had a call with their Mobius sort of team in regards to the kind of data sort of capture side of things, and they didn't know what Colby was, and I find it absolutely fascinating that these people don't understand this data schema that they feed into the CAF FMs, and they don't have that interoperability bit to be able to just export, be able to populate or import a new setup. And I do think there is this kind of case, certainly dealing with some trust before in the past that using other things. They kind of get stuck in their own quagmire of the data in that way by this software, by CAF FM CMMS. Then they lose the interoperability element because the data scheme has come out in such conflagrated ways. So we need to push back on these CMMS CAF FM lot to understand they need to play the game, I think.
Agreed. Dan?
Just to add what's been said to date, and I'm based in Ireland, but we're facing the same problem here. I don't know what's the case in the UK with government, and in our case, the HSE, which is equivalent to your NHS, has to go out to tender every few years for their CAFM system or their integrated work management system. And but the last person just called out exactly the problem. You have to be able to ensure that any CAFM system or any BMS system or any EMS system, energy management systems that's used in the built environment is using standards so that the information that's gathered during their period of time as when they won the contract is actually interoperable, persistent, and above all open, so they can be transferred to the next CAFM platform if a different CAFM system is chosen through the procurement system, which is mandatory in the case of Ireland. As I said, I'm not sure what the case is in the UK, but they have to go to tender every 3 years here. But this also leads back then to what happens in construction, is that everybody in the industry has to start with the end in mind. The end in mind is not the practical completion, it is the cradle to cradle, as we call it, the end use of that building. That could be 20 years, could be 30 years or 40 years, which ends up with a situation where you need what we call the digital building logbook, where all this information that's gathered through the full cycle for each of the core maintainable assets that are identified as part of the ISO 19650 AIR and AIM process, so i.e. the asset listed, that they are identified all the way through and tracked, and every human interaction that changes the state or status of any of those assets is actually recorded in an open, interoperable way for the reasons I gave earlier. So that's my contribution from an Irish perspective. So thank you.
Brilliant. Good. Okay. So,
sorry, there is a key point there, George, actually, on what Dan's just said is, if you think about the number of trusts, well, not just trusts, government buildings that are coming out of PFI in the next 10, 15 years, yeah, they're all being administered by the likes of Mighty or Sodexo or the FM providers, and they are all been running those facilities with their own CAFM systems. When they hand back those environments to the local trust or not, in some cases they'll just renew and stay with them because it's too difficult to do anything other than that. They've got to hand back those asset registers. They've got to hand back that environment in a manageable and operational way. So that means if they are coming back, there's a whole question around how that asset information gets either fed back into another CAFM system, or the person who's taking on the new environment, whether it's the local trust or whether it's another supplier, has got to be able to take that information in that format and populate either another CAFM environment or take on the same software that is already being used in the PFI. So it's quite a tricky, that it's going to be a massive problem in the next 10 years, because I think in the next 10 years there is a huge number of PFI buildings coming to expiry. I mean, massive. It's going to be one hell of a headache for the UK government. So not just healthcare.
Yeah, we're very heavily involved in that at the moment, because the FM, we're working for the FM companies in many cases,
Right.
and the result of that is that they're also very nervous about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is probably just worth saying, that is a common misunderstanding, probably not in your case, Mark, but this is really important to say. The CAFM system is typically, things like Maximo and Concept and the like, they're probably only managing 10% of the assets that are in that particular facility.
Yeah.
Now, that may be surprising to people, but that is the reality. And the reason for that is that they're typically being used as work order management systems for statutory and operationally critical individual assets, right? The other asset types that do need information monitoring against them for maybe life cycle planning, often that information is never put into the CAFM system. And one of the reasons for that, probably the prime reason for that, is that in a PFI situation, if you've got maintenance activity, or if you've got assets that have missed their maintenance time, you get penalized. Yeah. So the logical thing to do with that circumstance is you minimize the amount of assets that you put into the CAFM system. Right. So therefore, a lot of the maintenance that is responding to reactive maintenance, that you still need the information for, but if that asset is not being maintained, then you don't have the records for it. A good example of that are doors. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't put
Windows.
doors into a CAFM system. You might put fire doors into a CAFM system, right? Because it's statutory inspections, but the inspection itself is probably not being done by, may not even be recorded in the CAFM system. It's probably being recorded in a mobile app like Riskbase or Plan Radar or whatever. There's lots of different apps that are doing that, and the result is the surveys. The result is probably a PDF report that should go into the O&M, which brings me on, Tim, to probably just explain, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit about what we're doing with the Learning Centre for Sandwell. I'll come to you in a second, Dan, if that's okay.
That's perfectly okay.
Yes, okay. So with the Learning Centre, obviously George sort of spoke to me on Monday evening, early Monday evening. We've got this project, blah blah blah. Can we do this on it? So have to get all the data down. So and that usually is quite a challenge because for various reasons. So what I decided to do is use a desktop AI, and in this case it was called Claude, and they have a feature called Co-work, which enables me to write instructions and actually get it to do the work for me. So
Tim,
that was the first task.
Tim, I've just realised that what I should have done is just explain the context. So bear with me a second, right?
Okay.
So this is part of the Midland Met, the new Midland Met hospital. So it's a massive PFI. It's got a new learning centre has been built. It's been built by Kia, and we were commissioned to produce an asset information model of that particular facility. I can't show you that at the moment because we've not actually got permission to show that bit of it, right? But if anybody's interested, we will be able to show that next week. So if you're interested in seeing this new learning centre, if you just put learning centre in the chat, we can set up a half-hour session and we can show you what we've done. So the relevance of the learning centre is that what we've done is taken the as-built information, the records, and we've partnered with Multivista, who do surveys and 360 images, and they've recorded 360 photos of all the spaces. So the building is literally being handed over this week, and we can then show you what we've done there. Now, what we're then doing is overlaying with what's effectively a 2D BIM model with 360 photos. We're now overlaying the O&M information, which is what Tim's going to talk about now.
Right. So I can't show this Kobe check. I can't show the O&M checker.
You can show the Kobe. Yeah.
No, the O&M checker. I've run the O&M checker.
You can show that.
It's difficult, isn't it, really? Right. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just share my screen because I think it's important to sort of share that, because particularly one of the things I think it was Mark Lenton mentioned about security of data and everything like that. And one of the reasons for using some of the desktop facilities is that these programs they can actually manipulate and do stuff on your machine. So it's just running scripts and executing them, but it's extremely powerful and useful, particularly if you want it in a specific way. So all of this folder structure here has all been manipulated and generated using AI. So I just sort of was watching the telly while it was doing it. It's that cool. And the reason for doing that is that obviously you want it in a particular way that you want to be able to do things. So one of the things that I needed to do is have it organized by work packages, because that's what my checker is going to do. And one of the first things I did was run the file analyzer on their files as it was. So this was the report it gave me. I've just highlighted a couple of those things because this is usually the sort of stuff you get. Amazingly, there aren't any files that haven't got any length to them, which is nice, because we've had that before. But you can see the odd stray file. Well, we know what a Z7 is, but look at that. We've got 75 zip files because George was using this application's own AI to look for files. I said, well, you won't find them because they're actually in these zip files. But what I did was I got the AI to actually unzip all those files as well. So and then it generates a content for me as well, which is going to then be used by another process. So I'll just park that one for the moment and bring up another one. Which one is it? It's going to be this one. So once I had it organized by work package and then put the O&M file into that work package, then I could run the program that said, right, now go and check all those O&M files and then generate. One of the things it does is generate a report in a spreadsheet format. So this is like the manager's heads up, and then it also produces a Word document for every single O&M so that you can just send it off to them and say, this is what you need to fix. And there's a hyperlink in the report, so you can just go, and the hyperlink is that record there. It just tells you why it's failing that section. Okay, so it's a very simple heads up. That talked about, I did warn George, I said their O&Ms are very, very odd. They've not really provided, full ones. I mean, that's why the majority of it is red. And I've only done the fabric as well. So that's one of the aspects of it. But we think that this is, and I've not done the checking of any documents that they say they provided, because that requires another process to run, and I've not had a chance to do that. So that's where we are with this sort of analysis, to be able to quickly say, okay, you've just dumped me a massive 12 gig of data, and you want me to give you back a report and say, am I happy with it? So clearly not. So the other thing I wanted to show is what we did with another project, which is basically they have for all of their projects, they have one PDF file that is, they call it a health and safety file for each project they do. And one of the things, this is the Met one. So this is basically what the AI did for me with my instructions. I won't bore you with all those things, but you can see it's done a bit. So this one here is.
I'll stop you for a second on that, Tim, just for a second, right? So bear in mind that what we're looking for here is the community to come together and bring their expertise to it. Yeah. So what we're willing to do is to share with the community what tools we're creating, and we want other people to share their tools, and then we've got something that then is holistic.
Yeah.
So we appreciate there's IP and there's process in this and the like, and we need to work out how best to share that. But what we'd like you to do, if you believe you've got the knowledge to be able to go and look at hand over information and identify snags in it, then if you know what you were looking for, then if you want to be part of this O&M audit process, then just put O&M in the chat and we'll invite you. The meeting tomorrow afternoon is going to be the main driver for this, but you can then benefit from that.
Okay,
and if you're a technology person, then you could contribute to what Tim's doing here. Sorry, carry on, Tim.
So for UCL, this was basically run through, divide all this information up, set it all out so that you end up. So if I just get to that one, which was this one here, so you can see that we've got a folder structure here, information, drawings, products. So it's actually pulled all these things out of a big O&M file, including the drawings, so that you've now got access to the parts, but it's still all structured together. And that was the thing that did it. And then run a report that says, well, is this fit for purpose? Which was if I could just get to that, the one more into my workspace there, which is the Q&A one. Right, so this one is, it generated this and it identified we knew there were errors in the golden thread section, but we're getting a list of what the problems were there. And it produced this, and it said, these are serious things. Basically, they've got the wrong documents in the project. Their building control approval for a different building. And you just go, well, so what we've done is then package that into a skill which we should be able to run on any one of their health and safety files, because all of their health and safety files since 2017 are all structured the same. Fingers crossed. But
okay,
you get and the other thing is, I just want to mention this, George, because this is one of the things about, when people are using AI, when you're using somebody else's system, right? You're sat here, you're sat in your organization, you're paying for those credits to use the AI. You're not paying somebody else. But the other thing you can do is you can attach using tools, one of which is an MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol. And what I've done is I've connected ours to our PIM, which is basically Kobe, to the Kobe API, and I can then just ask natural language questions. So I can say, what have I got in such and such a room? How many systems have I got? Is this connected to such and such, or what is it connected to? If that information is there, and the other thing that we're working on is also then, right, if it's not there, can I fix it using natural language? So things like, oh, I've just changed my oven. What's your oven? Give me a URL to the data sheet, and I'll sort out the data and create a record, and then I'll swap it out and log it. So I know what it used to be, and now I know what it is, and when you installed it, and ask all those sort of things. When did the warranty start? This is just game changing from a point of view is that you're now in control of this. Your learning curve should be very, very steep. So long as you're an expert and you know what you're looking for, I mean, we get questions. Have you got all the positions of the fire dampers? And then somebody has to go to the application and look at it. I go, this is crazy. They should just be able to ask an AI, have you got all the positions? And it come back. The other great thing about it, I've been trying out, is also how it presents information as well. So we're going to get it to also display. I just need to. It's a long conversation. You can see I've been playing with here, but I got it to do some cards. Further down, further down. It's actually some of it was a bit of debugging as well in here, so you have to forgive that because he's very good at debugging stuff.
Just whilst Tim's looking,
you get the idea that once you say, "Can you tell me more about the motion sensor in the bedroom?" and then it'll tell me. So I just think this is potentially has got real legs. So sorry.
Yeah. So the important thing here is that we, as Active Plan, and also other members of our community, we've got the knowledge of what the answer should look like, and that's really important when you're using AI, because if you don't know what it should look like and can actually review it in that context, then that's dangerous. Right. What I'm looking for within this group is having more people that know what the answer should look like, because by doing that, it means that we're going to create an increasingly reliable and auditable set of information. Dan, I'm sorry. Thank you for holding on.
No problem. What Tim has just shown there, and Tim, I admire your enthusiasm for it. It came across in your presentation there. Is exactly what's going to happen in the industry. Clients will use Claude Cowork and establish what is missing and what we call management by exception. And this is going to create a huge problem for consultants, contractors, and for those people who've been providing the service. Because George, what you said earlier is 100% correct. The CAFM systems of today will not contain all the information that's required to manage buildings, and above all, the actual reuse of products within those buildings to meet ESG requirements. What you've seen for what Tim Atkin just showed there is the future. The problem is that AI cannot invent when a product or a core maintainable asset was last serviced, when it was installed to look at your warranty periods. That information needs to be captured. Therefore, the industry as a whole needs to look at what is required to complement what AI solutions or agentic sourcing or agentic commerce, whatever solution or agentic design can't pull from sourced information. That's the gap. And that's the gap that has to be filled by the AEC and the FM sectors going forward. That's my contribution to this. Thank you.
Yeah. George, can I just add on to that? That's absolutely correct, which is why I've been working on how would you put a product in? And under what circumstances would you do using natural language? So I went through to build up that skill. So what it would need to do, it would need to say, well, does this manufacturer already exist in the data set? No. How do it can create it? Can you? We've already got in the product library, in the research product library. This is so. These are things that are not in the production versions. The ability to just extract the data that's required for a product. And then create the record, and obviously with approval. So it does the search, and you can use a URL, or you can say search this document for the information, and it comes back and says this is what I've managed to find. We're moving now onto a situation where it will suggest maybe I need to go here, or maybe I need to go there. When I was doing the stuff earlier for the for that Midland Met Learning Campus. One of the things I wanted to do was just create some Kobe contact data, but based upon the stuff that it already had. I said, right, and it came up and it said, I said, oh, that doesn't look right to me. Why don't you use the domain of the email addresses and go and search their websites? So it did, and it came back with addresses and telephone numbers. And I just thought, this is this is really clever because it means that there's no excuse for the people who should be producing this information to actually produce it, because that is their key criticism. We haven't been paid enough to do it because the tools that they've got to do it are data entry intensive and extremely not mind-numbingly boring. Whereas now it's a bit more exciting. You just say, well, we've got this product, does it meet the requirements? And it goes, well, the requirements in the AIR that you gave says you need to provide this, and if you can't provide this, then should you really be specifying it? But again, it's, there's going to be human interaction, but there's no excuse for them not to be able to provide it now. And I just think that sits in with what you're saying. But at the same time, is that we're all spending a lot of time filling in the gaps, identify the gaps, and then try and fill them in. But who takes responsibility for that? So,
brilliant.
Agreed.
Okay, so hopefully people have found it worthwhile. We've got the AI meeting tomorrow. If Tim's infected you with his enthusiasm, and then we'll be repeating this in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, obviously, if you're interested we've got the learning centre that we can show probably next week. So I think we've got people logged in for that, and possibly if you want to talk about any of these things, just we've got a one-to-one. You can just ask for a meeting. Matt Cunliffe.
Yeah, George, just quickly on the future sessions, is it possible to look a little bit more at Mortar? Because I'm hearing a lot about it, but I don't know about it much.
Yeah, certainly. So we can very much arrange that. I mean, Mortar is just basically a tool that it's a bit like Airtables, but I think probably a bit better. And it's doing a similar type of thing to basically moving away from spreadsheets to a database-driven thing.
it's more about the collaborative side of it, isn't it, George? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the take I got on it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good. Okay. Well, has anybody else got any observations? Otherwise, we'll close it off.
Don't forget the forum next week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Martin. Carry on.
Hi there. Just one kind of concern, I suppose. So my experience is I've been a building services engineer for a long time. Kind of got into more of the BIM stuff along the way, and then now me and my business partner run a company where we assist MEP engineers with their deliverables that's required under, all the golden thread and all of the COBie deliverables, etc. And one thing that we've found, which is very, very common, is that the requirements for the data often get pushed down to the MEP engineers, including data that they're not, there's no way that they can possibly provide that information. Case in point, things like warranty information, when was the product installed, things like that. It's impossible to provide that data. And that's obviously something that I would like, tools that are checking for compliance to be aware of. And
I think that's a really good point. So what you're saying, Martin, is that you're working for an M&E designer, not necessarily installer.
Yeah.
And therefore the designer couldn't possibly know when it was installed.
I feel your pain, Martin.
Well, that's. I mean, I've worked for a lot of contractors as well, doing their stage 5 compliance, and very much the attitude tends to be, get someone else to do it. And I think most of that stems from a lack of understanding and lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
But the main aspect is really, I think compliance should kind of come with a caveat that says who's responsible for it. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about who's responsible for what information at what time.
That sounds to me, Martin, as though you're a volunteer for the task team. I'll plug Franco into you.
Super.
Good. Okay, smashing. Gordon.
Yeah, just reinforce that with Martin, effectively. Just remember that a lot of distribution chain doesn't know where the product goes because they don't get told for the specific application. We talked about it yesterday. The Product Association Act, the new Building Safety Act is going to have sections of regulation that the distributors are duty bound to know what the application is for the component that is provided to a contractor to install. So there is a process that's coming, but it's revolutionary to the national distribution network that centrally warehouses boxes of stuff and shifts it around the country, and they really don't know where it goes. And certainly the manufacturers of that component have no idea where it goes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks' time, but more importantly, perhaps see you next week at the forum meeting, which is on Wednesday at 11 o'clock.
Fantastic.
Cheers.
Thank you
Bye.
very
Thank you all.
much. Take
Keep
care.
well.
Bye,
Thanks
bye,
very
bye.
much.